All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome, Baruch Hashem, a great zechus to be able to host our first women's shir in our new shul. So Baruch Hashem, Shechianu v'kimanu v'gyanu. We have special guests tonight. All of the Sifrei Torah here. Sorry, the Aron Kodesh is being finished, and also our microphone system, which does exist. The speakers are here, just somehow wasn't connecting exactly today. So, all right, kol aschalas kashos. So I have to speak a little bit louder, or feel free also to move closer. So, Amirat Hashem, let us begin. We'll begin by thanking all of our sponsors for tonight's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the entire year for Tafshin Pei Hey, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shirim and droshos as a schus for Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael. The Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, the Kelman family in memory of Amit ben David Levi, who was killed fighting in Gaza on the first night of Hanukkah. May his neshama have an aliyah and his family in Nechama. And our week of learning sponsors Rabbi Aryeh and Chana Richter, in memory of Rabbi Richter's grandmother, whose niftaras yesterday. The levaya was this morning. Sarah Bas Shimon Zechron Levracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, neshama will have an aliyah and the family in Nechama. With that, let us begin. So, Amirat Hashem, tonight we are going to get back to our original mandate and mission of the Parsha and Tehillim. So as such, let's begin with a little bit of Tehillim. So if you take a look in Kapitel Ches, source number 1, David HaMelech writes, he says, Ki yareh shamecha ma'aseh etzba'osecha. David HaMelech says, when I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, yareach v'kochavim asher konanta, the moon and the stars that you have established. So first of all, there are many times throughout Sefer Tehillim where David HaMelech uses nature as an incredible opportunity to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now the truth is, this is not David HaMelech's idea. Already the Rambam writes about this in Hilchos Deos. The Rambam says so beautifully. The Rambam says that a person is supposed to fall in love with Hashem as a man falls in love with a woman. That's how the Rambam describes the relationship between a Jew and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Rambam says, how should a person fall in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How do you fall in love with God? So the Rambam says, the first way is through nature. One could look at the natural world. One could just see the beauty of the natural world, and through that, which is just the creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's just a window into the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and yet you're able to fall in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through nature. So many times, you'll see David HaMelech speak about nature and utilize nature as a mechanism, as a form, as a platform, a springboard for a loving and beautiful and intense relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What I want to draw your attention to is something very interesting over here. So David HaMelech says, Ki era shemecha, and I see the heavens, the works of your fingers, yareach v'kochav masher kananta, the moon and the stars. Interestingly enough, what doesn't David HaMelech mention? The sun. So what's interesting already is the Radak in number 2 is intrigued by this, and he says as follows. He says, "V'lo zochar hashemesh." David HaMelech only spoke about the moon. He did not speak about the sun. Yesh omrim ki balayla amar zeh mizmar beishai mistakel biyarech v'kochavim umevim miniflos haborei. Okay, so the Radak himself gives a number of answers. First answer is, David HaMelech said this kapitel when? At night. Said it at night. So at night, what is he looking at? He's looking at the moon and the stars. So as such, that's what he's looking at. So that's what he talks about. Second opinion, V'yesh omrim ki bayom lo yira ki mashemesh levado ubalaylo yira tzava gadol ma'od. Second opinion says the Radak is, when you go ahead and by day, when you stare at the heavens, Meryl, can you take some of the sheets to the back, Shefa? Thank you. So by day, when you go ahead and you look at the heavens, right, all you see in there is the sun, right? That's all you see during the day is the sun. Whereas when you look up at night you're able to see all kinds of things. You see the moon, you see the stars. There's so much more light. So when David HaMelech looks at the natural world, it's interesting because the night is almost so much more striking than the day itself. Lefichach lo zachar hashemesh. Then he quotes another opinion. Okay, he goes on. The point over here is that the Radak is intrigued that David HaMelech makes mention of the moon and the stars, but never makes mention of the sun. Now, the reason why this caught my attention is because this is very much in line and very much connected to this week's parasha. If you take a look at source number 3. So again, Parashas Bo, we read of the first mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Hashem said to Moshe and to Aaron in Eretz Yisrael, saying the following, HaChodesh hazel lochem, Rosh Chadoshim, Rishon hu l'chadshei hashana. This month is the first of all months, the beginning of all months for the year. Now again, this is the mitzvah of what we call Kiddush HaChodesh. Now Kiddush HaChodesh means sanctification of the new moon. We know that in Judaism, we use a lunar calendar. How do you know when the new month begins? So remember again, now we have a set calendar. But in the old days, before we had a set calendar, so what would happen? Witnesses, people would see the moon, and they would see, again, remember at the end of the month, the moon is not visible. So when there would be the mola, the first little crescent of the moon, witnesses would see it, they would come to the Sanhedrin, the high court in Yerushalayim, they would be testified, they would be cross-examined, and again, if their testimony checked out, then Beis Din would declare the new month. So this is the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. So the first mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Klal Yisrael while we are still in Egypt is this mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctification of the new moon. And again, interestingly enough, so what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing over here is he's giving us a calendar. He's giving us a system of time, specifically not a solar calendar, but rather a lunar calendar. And the Ramban points out over here, number 4, he says, "HaChodesh hazeh lechem rosh chadashim, zu mitzvah rishona shetziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yisrael dei Moshe." This was the first mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us through Moshe Rabbeinu. V'lachin amar be'eretz Mitzrayim kishar mitzvos shebatorah hayu bahar Sinai. So the Ramban makes an amazing observation. This is the first mitzvah. First mitzvah HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us as a people. Now again, not the first mitzvah as individuals. Remember again, Avraham Avinu was given bris milah. Yaakov Avinu was given the prohibition of consuming gid hanosha. There's a mitzvah perivarivia, having children. But again, the first mitzvah that is given to us as a people is Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctification of the new moon, concept of Rosh Chodesh. What's the obvious question? Why? Okay, it's always safe to ask why. Why what? Why what? Why is this the first one? Right, think about it for just a moment. Right, if I were to ask you, what should be the first mitzvah HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands Klal Yisrael, what would you say? First mitzvah? Shabbos, right? Always a good one. What else? Sorry? Bris milah, right? Because interestingly enough, remember, Bris milah as an obligation actually only comes upon us in Parshas Tazria. The fact that Avraham Avinu did it doesn't make it nationally binding. Excellent. So Bris milah, Shabbos, I don't know, there are so many other mitzvahs that v'ahavta l're'acha kamocha. Right? There are so many other mitzvahs. Kiddush HaChodesh, I'm not going to take a show of hands about who finds the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh to be exciting, inspiring, and exhilarating, right? It's a very technical, mechanistic mitzvah that the majority of the people are not involved in. Remember again, Beis Din, the high court, Sanhedrin, declares the new month. There's witnesses who see it, they come. The rest of us, we hear about it. Okay, Rosh Chodesh, wonderful, fantastic. But yet, this is the first mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. So of course, what's the Pasha Pshat? Why is this the first mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us? Rabbi Soloveitchik says something very beautiful. He says that if there's one thing that a slave does not have, it is control over time. Essentially, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does through this mitzvah is, he gives us control over time. He says, HaChodesh hazeh lochem. It's interesting, right? When is Rosh Chodesh? When we declare it to be Rosh Chodesh. What if Beis Din is wrong? In other words, there is no wrong by Beis Din when it comes to Rosh Chodesh. In other words, whatever they declare, that's correct. That's why, interestingly enough, if you notice, on Shabbos by Kiddush, right, we end Kiddush with Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. Right, blessed are you Hashem who sanctifies Shabbos. Because remember again, who sanctifies, who vests Shabbos with Kedusha? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet by Yom Tov, what's the bracha at the end of Kiddush? Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu vests Klal Yisrael with Kedusha, and with the Kedusha that we have, we create the Yom Tovim. What does that mean? We decide when Yom Tov is. We decide, because when we declare Rosh Chodesh, then ultimately, again, that triggers everything else afterwards. So Rabbi Soloveitchik posits that the first mitzvah HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us is control over time. Because if there's one thing that a slave does not have, it's control over his or her time. The first manifestation of freedom is control over time. This is incredibly important because One of the most common reasons we give for non-accomplishment and non-performance is, I don't have time. So you have to understand, that's inherently false. I have time. Now again, I don't have an infinite amount of time, but I have time. And then it is up to me to decide and to allocate how to use that time. That's what it means to be free. To be free means to have the gift of time allocation. There is enough time for everything that is important. The challenge in life is not that there's not enough time. The challenge in life is figuring out how to prioritize. What's more important, what's less important, what's not important. And we know that just a lot of times in life, we just end up spending all of our time on things that may not be unimportant. As we get older, we recognize that there are different gradations of importance. There are things that are important, and then there are things that are important now. And what ends up happening in life very often is we get involved in things that are important, but they're not necessarily important now. And when you end up spending all of your time on things that are important but not important now, you don't find enough time to do the things that are important now, and therefore end up not accomplishing. But again, how incredible is it? How incredible is it to go ahead and to take a step back and to recognize, I control my time. I control, the Piazetzna, Klonos Kalman Shapir, the Piazetzna, in his Sefer B'nei Machshava Tova. He talks about, again, how to lead an impactful life. And he says, the most important criteria for leading an impactful life, get ready for it, most important thing for leading an impactful life is, Piazetzna says, time management. Time management. And the Rebbe posits that a person should know how they spend all of their time. And he says, my entire day should be scheduled. And he says something amazing. You think to yourself, okay, well, what is the PhD going to schedule? I wake up in the morning, I learn Torah the whole day. He says, no. He says, you know what? He says, you want time to hang out with your friends? The PhD says, he says, good. Spend time with your friends. How much time? How much time? Decide on the outset, how much time? An hour, 2 hours? You're having dinner with your family? Great. How much time? How much time? Right, that's why, by the way, it's interesting. The antithesis to accomplishment is schmoozing. Schmoozing is like mamish maises satan. Why? Because what happens when you schmooze? What happens with schmoozing? Time becomes irrelevant. And you just schmooze. There's a time to talk, but to talk endlessly, just for the sake of talking, that's wasting time. You want to talk with your friends? Great. How much time is being allocated to that? You want to relax? Everyone has to relax. How much time is being allocated? And it's interesting. The Piazetzna doesn't say, give this amount of time to eating and this amount of time to hanging out with your friends. The Piazetzna essentially, do whatever you want. You're a big boy, big girl. Do whatever you want. But make sure that your life is properly scheduled. Because where there is scheduled living, where there is time management, that is where there is success. When I can't account, anyone ever, sometimes you have a day like this where you look back and you're like, where did the whole day go? And it is incredibly frustrating because if I have a very busy day, but I know where all the time went, okay, it was busy, it was hectic, but I know what every moment was used for or every hour was used for. But sometimes time just kind of like flies away and I don't know where it went. And it's frustrating because I have to ask myself, was it purposeful, not purposeful, meaningful, not meaningful? So therefore, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, the first mitzvah, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, the first mitzvah is you own time. And as such, use it wisely. Take a look at number 5. This is actually incredible, actually really incredible. And what was to me very, very special about this is actually the sugya, right? The topic of Kiddush HaChodesh and Rosh Chodesh was actually today's daf in Daf Yomi. So it's incredible that Daf Yomi is talking about Kiddush HaChodesh, the Parasha is talking about Kiddush HaChodesh, David HaMelech is talking about the moon, everyone is talking about the moon. Everyone. So look what the Gemara says in number 5. The Gemara says, beautiful Gemara. Am Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina, Am Rabbi Yossi, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Kalam Mevarich, Ala Chodesh Bizmano. Whoever, now again, what they're talking about over here is Kiddush Levana. So it's interesting, there's a whole discussion about do women say Kiddush Levana, not say Kiddush Levana? So there's a whole discussion, not a topic for interesting discussion, but not a topic for tonight. So again, but we'll just, so in the abstract, right? We know, actually this month, usually we do it Matzah Shabbos, first Matzah Shabbos within 72 hours after the new month, we're able to go ahead and say Kiddush Levana. We, again, essentially, I don't want to say we bless the new moon, but that's effectively what happens. We make a bracha over the new month, over the new moon. So the Gemara says that whoever goes ahead and says Kiddush Levana, Kilu Makabel Pnei Shechina. It is as if he is receiving the Ribono Shel Olam. That Kiddush HaChodesh is so powerful that it is as if literally one is having a communion, a connection, a relationship, being Makabel, receiving the Ribono Shel Olam. The Gemara calls them Psukim, Tani Rabbi Shmuel, not only that, the Gemara says that if the only thing a person got to do the entire month was Kiddush HaChodesh, that would be enough. So a profound Gemara. Literally, again, if you say Kiddush Levana, it is as if you are receiving the Shechina. Now, again, that's a powerful statement, and that is a loaded statement about the power of Rosh Chodesh, the power of the new moon. So what's the pshat? So look at the Maharsha in number 6. The Maharsha says something so beautiful. He says, V'yesh lomar. What's the meaning of this? What's the power of Kiddush Levana? That if you go and you say Kiddush Levana, and again, remember, it's not just about saying Kiddush Levana, it's the power of the moon, the power of the new month is so profound that literally, again, if somehow you engage in the dynamic of Rosh Chodesh, and by the way, it's Rosh Chodesh this Thursday. I just want to point out just what an incredible just confluence of events this is. Daf Yomi, Parashas HaShavua, David HaMelech, and Rosh Chodesh this Thursday, Wednesday night, Thursday. So the Rebbe says, the Maharsha says as follows, number 6. V'yesh lomar, b'fi she'yisor begalusan, einon zochen liros pnei shechina, u'rechokim mikabalasa. So listen to this. Klal Yisrael in Galus, which is us, Klal Yisrael in diaspora, we are not able to have the same relationship with Hashem. This is important to understand. As a result of being in Galus, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is different. Everything just about our Judaic lives is different. And it's important to understand. It's not to say that one can't have Kiddush and Galus. We have plenty of holiness, even in diaspora. Baruch Hashem, we have shuls, we have yeshivas, we have schools. We're thriving, we're growing, we're doing. But there's something missing. There's something missing in our relationship with Hashem as long as the Jew is in the diaspora. But look what he writes. He says, Aval Chidush HaLevana, hu simin li Yisrael, shemasidin l'schadish. But the moon is a metaphorical representation to the idea that one day we will once again become whole. L'far liyotzram b'kibol pnei hashchina, kimo sheyora al nusach birchas halavana, u'lezeh kishanu mevarchin al hachodesh bizmano, shu simin shanu asidin l'schadish kamosa, varik alu ki'ilu mekal pnei hashchina. So this is absolutely beautiful. And this concept we can apply many different ways. Essentially, the Maharsha says like this. When you see the moon, what are you reminded of? What are you reminded of? You're reminded of the fact that even things that are deficient now become whole. That's what the moon teaches us. Right? We go out, you're going to go outside the end of this week, and what are you going to see when you look up? What are you going to see? What are you going to see? You'll see, tomorrow night, right? The next night you'll see nothing. But then by the time you come to Shabbos, Matzah Shabbos, you'll see a little sliver. But here's the incredible part. No one ever says, Nebuch, look at the moon. Right? Only a little sliver. Nebuch, so we feel so bad for it. Why? Because what do we all know? That the moon is going to become whole. The moon, says the Maharsha, is the ultimate paradigmatic metaphorical representation of the idea that even things that are diminished, and even things that are broken, and even things that are incomplete, one day become whole. Now the Maharsha understands this on a national level. So on a national level, when we say Kiddush Levana, it gives us incredible chizuk. It gives us incredible strength because I see our people in the moon. They're just like the moon waxes and wanes. Right now it looks deficient, but one day it's going to be whole. Klal Yisrael, right now, we're not complete. And this is, this resonates with such a profound importance to us on so many different levels. We're not complete. We're not complete on so many levels. Sometimes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the ability to adapt. And on one hand, the ability to adapt is one of the most powerful tools we have. Because what that tells us is, no matter what we face in life, we're going to make it through to the other end. Because we always have the ability to adapt. There's a danger to adapting also. What's the danger of adaptation? What's the danger? you kind of like, things that are abnormal become normal. So I was thinking about this today. We watch with bated breath about the hostages being released. And like I've said over the last number of weeks, wherever you feel politically, the deal is a good deal, it's not a good deal, Israel should be negotiating, shouldn't be. The idea that Baruch Hashem, precious neshamas are coming home is something that fills the heart with a profound sense of just simcha, that at least some broken hearts will be mended. But you think about it, that our enemies are so barbaric, so tyrannical, that like we get messages that at least 8 of the next batch to be released are no longer alive, and we can't. And we're not even told. Like there's not even who's alive, who's not alive. And like we read these headlines and we hear it, and it becomes part of our vernacular. Like it just like somehow that in some universe that's normal. That's normal when there's nothing further, and the fact that like no one even like bats an eyelash, right? The UN is not convening like an emergency session about the fact that innocent civilians are killed. Like no one cares. No one in the world cares about us. But for us, like it's normal. We've adapted to it. And we've had a new normal since October 7th, right? We operate. We've adapted. The strength of our people is we adapt. We move forward. But every once in a while, we take a step back and we say to ourselves, as they say, "Zelo normali." That's Latin, right? In other words, like it's not normal. This is not normal. And we see the moon, and the moon gives us chizuk, because the moon reminds us that the good news is, at some point, we will become whole again. It'll happen. Just like the moon becomes whole, Klal Yisrael will become whole. Now again, the Maharsha understands this to mean the Messianic era. Mashiach will come. We have hope, and every single new month brings with it just a feeling of hope and optimism and simcha that maybe this is going to be the month that as the moon becomes whole, Klal Yisrael will become whole as well. That's the power, says the Maharsha of Kiddush Levana. But he goes on, I think what he's also adding on over here, it's not just true on a national level, it's true on a personal level as well. That how often do we go through life and there are moments where I'm like the moon in the middle of the month, right? It's interesting. What does the moon look like in the middle of the month, right? It's whole. Just understand, appreciate something. When did we leave Mitzrayim? What date did we leave Egypt? The 15th of Nisan. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu take us out on the 15th of Nisan? Why? Because at the end of the day, remember again, there's no artificial light. So he's taking us out at night. Remember again, taking us out in the middle of the night when the moon is light. So, and I always say to my children, now they're older, but when they were younger, we walk outside, open the door, I say, look up at the moon, right? That's the same moon that our ancestors, they followed that light when they left Egypt thousands of years ago. That's the moon. And in our own personal lives, right? How many of us experience moments where I'm shining bright, everything is great, operating on all cylinders. Life is, I'm not going to say perfect because life is never perfect, but life is great, everything is going as it should be. And then there are other times when I feel like a sliver. I just feel down and out. I feel compromised, I feel broken, I feel like a failure, I feel like I just don't have it together. And I feel like a broken person. I feel just like a sliver of the moon. So what do you do? And we all have moments like that. For some of us, those moments last a few moments. For some of us, those moments last years. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? So the Maharsha says, you gain chizuk from the moon. Because the moon is also very deficient and almost non-existent at the beginning of the month. But what happens? The moon goes ahead and grows into something beautiful. The moon regenerates. And the moon, says the Maharsha, teaches us, not just on a national level, but on a personal level as well, that we too have the ability to regenerate. That even when we're down and out, we have the ability to launch a personalistic comeback. Do you know Rabbi Nachman? Everyone thinks Rabbi Nachman's what's Rabbi Nachman's most famous statement? Most famous statement. No Hasidim here tonight. This is disappointing, right? Right? Mitzvah gedol lios v'simcha tamid. That's what Rabbi Nachman says. Rabbi Nachman has an even more famous statement. You know what his more famous statement is? Ein shum yeyosh ba'olam klal. There's no yeyosh in this world. A Jew never gives up. Rabbi Nachman says something so beautiful. He says, people think that the greatest spiritual existential danger to a Jew is chet, sinning. The Rebbe says, not true. Everyone sins. Everyone sins. Every single one of us sins. Everyone sins. What's the question? The question is, what averos are you doing? How often are you doing it? Right? That's what it is. But we all sin. So it can't be that sin is the greatest existential danger. The Rebbe says the greatest existential danger is yeyosh. When a person gives up on themselves. Right? When a person just says, like, I'm done. I give up. I can't make anything more of myself. I can't do anything else with myself. I'm done. When that yeyosh, when you give up on you, says the Rebbe, that's when the Yetzer Hara has won the battle. As long as you don't give up on you, there's always the opportunity to come back. The moment you give up on yourself, it's done. Yetzer Hara has won the battle. Says the Maharsha, the moon teaches us not to give up on ourselves. Because you look at the moon, certain times of the month, and again, if you remember, we always know the end of the story. But imagine for a moment if you didn't know the end of the story of the moon. And you went at the beginning of the month, you looked at the moon, what would you say? Ay, Nebuch, Shefala, moon, I'm so sorry for you. Right? You're so pathetic. You're so pathetic. You're a little sliver. You're like the little, what is it? The little engine that couldn't, whatever it is. You know, you're pathetic, right? All you are is a sliver. And yet, amazingly enough, the moon regenerates, the moon re-illuminates, and the moon becomes whole. Says the Maharsha. That is the metaphor for us as individuals as well. Rabbi Nachman says, Ein shum yesh ba'olam klal. Don't give up on yourself. You're a little sliver right now. Okay, you'll get there. You'll get back to it. Right? You'll get back to your middle of the month, so to speak. You'll get back to your former luster. Now again, maybe you will or you won't get back to what was. But one thing is clear, which is you could regenerate. You could regenerate. You could regroup and you could rebuild. So therefore, says the Maharsha so beautifully, do you want to know why the first mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, ultimately, again, is Kiddush HaChodesh? Why? Why is that the first mitzvah? Because think about what this mitzvah is. This mitzvah is the message HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us that no matter how bad things look, no matter how deficient you may be, as a nation or as an individual, there is always the ability, like the moon, to regroup, to regenerate, and to shine once again. Another approach. Take a look at number 7. Another beautiful idea over here. Again, all from the moon. So if you take a look at number 7, so what happens? So again, we say this, by the way, I just took this from the Siddur over here, that by a bris milah, so the phrase we say is, Zeh ha'katan gadol yihiyah. Zeh ha'katan gadol yihiyah. This little one will be great. Now, the obvious question is, okay, shkayach, what are we saying? Now the baby is little, one day the baby will be big. Okay, doesn't seem to be the most profound thing to say. So I show you something quite interesting. If you take a look at source number 8, in source number 8, so the Torah says as follows. Torah says, if you notice, this is back to Bereshis. When Hashem created the luminaries, so the pasuk says, "Vayasel Elokim et shtei ha'maros hagdolim." Hashem created the 2 large luminaries, and then it says, "Es ha'ma'or hagadol shalas bayom, v'es ha'ma'or hakaton shalas balayla." The large luminary to shine by day, and the small luminary to shine by night, and the stars. So the large luminary, of course, is the sun. The small luminary is the moon. Wherein lies the difference between the sun and the moon? What's the difference between the sun and the moon? Where does the sun's light come from? The sun. Right? Where does the moon's light come from? The sun. The moon doesn't generate its own light. The moon reflects the light of the sun. So interestingly enough, so some posit that this is what we say to a baby at the bris milah. Zeh ha'katan gadol yihiyah. Right now, right, what does a child do? A child doesn't really create his or her light. Right? What does a child do? A child more often just reflects the light of their parents, which of course is the awesome responsibility of parenthood. Right? The awesome, children, and we were all children once upon a time. I would venture to say we remember very little of what our parents said, and remember almost everything that our parents did. Parenting is all about shining the right light onto your children. Because our children, at least initially, reflect the light that we give them. So if we give them beautiful holy light, they'll reflect that because they're not generating their own light early on. Right? But if I go ahead, that's all right. If you ever say something that you didn't want your children to hear, chances are what's going to happen? They're going to hear it, right? And they're probably going to say it and they're going to share it because that's what children do. Children reflect the light of their parents. So what we say to a little boy at his bris, Zeh katan gadol yihiyah. Right now, you're like the small luminary, like the moon. You'll reflect the light of your parents. But we hope one day what will happen? You'll create your own light, like the sun. Right now when you're little, you're a moon. But one day, hopefully, Eretz Hashem, you'll become a sun and you will create your own light. Why is this important for us? Because this is part of our personal maturation as well. A lot of times in life, we rely too much on the light of other people. I wait for other people to shine their light onto me, right? People go through this all the time. I'm ready to be inspired. I want to live an inspired Jewish life, right? So I'm ready. All right, so whose job is it? It's the rabbi's job, the rebbe's job, the rebbe's job, the speaker's job, this. But I'm ready to be inspired. I'll even put down the remote, right? In other words, I'm really ready to be inspired totally. But it's someone else's job to shine the light onto me. No, it's not. It's no one's job to inspire you. It is your job to self-inspire. It is no one's job to make you want to become the best version of yourself. It's your job to self-actualize. The problem is, many of us never outgrow our childhood moon phase. And we spend our lives just expecting everyone to do everything for us. Right? So as a child has every right to expect that his or her parents are going to do for them. That's what it means to be a child. You're dependent. So I'm a moon as a child. I need my parent to shine the light on me. But a lot of times we go through life and we kind of outsource our success to other people. I'm ready to shine light. Bring it on, right? My spouse needs to do this, and my husband, my friends need to do this, and the rabbi needs to do this, and this one needs to do this. My employees do this. My kids need to do this, and everyone is supposed to shine light on me so that I can reflect that light out. But that's not the way it works. That's being a child. We start out as a moon, but then as we grow older, we have to learn to become a sun and to create our own light. But how do we start out in life? We start out in life by taking in the light from everywhere else. That's what we do. We take in the light. And I think even as adults, even though our job is to become a sun and to create our own light, but still, we need to take in the opportunities to soak in positive light, like the moon, wherever we can. Perhaps that's also why HaKadosh Baruch Hu begins with Chodesh Hazalechem, Rosh Chodesh Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael, remember again, when we left Mitzrayim, it was like a birth. Yetzias Mitzrayim is often referred to as a birth. Egypt is referred to as a womb, is the mother, right? And Yetzias Mitzrayim is referred to as a birth. So it's almost as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Klal Yisrael, your children coming into this world, soak up the light. Take the light of Moshe Rabbeinu. Take the light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to give you. Take the light of each other. And then one day, right now you're Ketanim, one day, right now you're children. But Zeh katan gadol yihiyah. You will become adults. And as adults, you have an obligation to go ahead and create your own light. And a last approach. Then we'll tie this all together. A last approach. Another beautiful Gemara, also from today's daf. Rabbi Yehuda. This is the bracha that we recite for Kiddush Levana, right? So actually, it's incredible. The bracha that we recite even today, up to this day, to Kiddush Levana, comes from the Gemara. So the Gemara says as follows. Rabbi Yehuda. Listen to this. Hashem ma'amara barash hakim. So this is the text of the bracha. Hashem writes to us, Baruch Hashem l'kinu melech olam. Blessed are you, Hashem, Master of the universe, King of the universe. Hashem ma'amara barash hakim. With your word, you created the heavens. Uberuach piv kol tzivam. With the breath of your mouth, the hosts of the heavens. Chok uzman nasan lahem. You set for them a law and a time. Shelo yeshanu es tafkidam, and they don't deviate from their task. Sasim usmechim lasos ritzon konam, and they are joyous and glad to perform the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Maharsha number 10, it is taken by this idea, Shelo yeshanu es tafkidam. They don't change their job. And the Maharsha writes, Perish, shelo yishanu minui shalahem, miloshan v'yifkedeu al beiso. V'rashi perish v'loshan sivui. V'amar sasim usmecha. Listen to this. Do you know what the greatness of the moon is? The greatness of the moon is that the moon always stays on task. The moon has a responsibility and it executes responsibility. And I know what you're saying, well, so does the sun. So does the sun. The moon has a more complicated task, right? Why does it have a more complicated task? Because the sun always looks the same way. The moon has to know when to look a certain way at different times. In the beginning of the month like this, middle of the month like this, end of the month like this, and no matter what is happening in the world, the moon always stays on task. Why? Because the moon has a shlichus. The moon has a mission. The moon has an agency. And the moon takes that mission so seriously that nothing ever derails it. Do you know the power of going out and seeing the moon every single month? Is that it reinforces our need to lead and to live a mission-driven life. What's our shlichus? What's our shlichus? I think as we go, we recognize it. The mashal I often give is, if somebody stands by the street corner, a busy street corner, and stands there the whole day, helping elderly people cross the street, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Is that a day well spent? What would you say? Day well spent, yes or no? Sounds like it, right? Chesed. So the truth is, maybe yes, maybe no. What does it depend? Now, in other words, think about it like this. If I was supposed to pick up my child at school, but I didn't pick them up because I was helping people cross the street, so suddenly, as much as I was doing something good, I neglected a responsibility. Why do I share this mashal? Sometimes in life you could be involved in good things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the things you need to be doing. I often reference back the Ramchal, or Moshe Chaim Sato, in his introduction to Mesilas Yesharim, asks an interesting question. He says a Jew always asks themselves one simple question, which is, Ma chovaso ba'olamo. What is my obligation in this world? If you notice again, the Ramchal says, person doesn't ask themselves, what do I want to do when I grow up? What do I want to be? How do I want to spend my time? That's not the question that you ask. The question that you ask is, what's my shlichus? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What is it that I'm supposed to accomplish? Now, sometimes what you want to do and what God wants you to do are the same thing. But a lot of times in life, it's not the same thing. A lot of times in life, I want to be doing something else. But what Baruch Hu wants me and needs me to do is something dramatically different. And what it means to be a dedicated servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a willingness to bend your knee before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to do the shlichus that He wants of you, even if it's not the shlichus that you want of yourself. And says the Gemara, says the Maharsha so profoundly, who teaches us that? The moon. Let me ask you this. If you ask the moon, do you want to wax and wane? Right, moon? Do you want to become almost invisible during the month? What would you say? If you had to put forward a guess, what do you think? What would the moon say? No, are you kidding? Like the moon's in direct competition with the sun, right? So the sun always gets to stand there. The sun is always strong. The sun is always intact. The sun is always whole. And yet the moon says, I have to grow. I have to wax. I have to wane. I have to be big. I have to be small. I have to be whole. I have to be incomplete. Is it a little fair? It's a little fair. So why should I have to do that? But that's the shlichus. That's the shlichus of the moon. And the moon executes the agency faithfully and never departs from its role and always does what it's supposed to do and fulfills the agency shelo yishanu es tafkidam. There's a tafkid, there's a mission, there's a role, there's an agency, and the moon does not deviate. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, HaChodesh hazalochem. The first month, the first message I'm going to give you is Kiddush HaChodesh. Why? Because at the end of the day, the most important characteristic, or one of the more important facets of living an impactful life, is to live a mission-driven existence. What's your shlichus? What's your agency? Now, I want to point out, it doesn't have to be that a person just has one shlichus their entire life. right? It could be that I have multiple agencies, and maybe today my shlichus is this, and tomorrow my shlichus is something else. But every day has to be a mission-driven agency. That's the power of the moon. And now if we bring this full circle, so now we understand, right? So let's go back. Remember, how did we start? David HaMelech, when he looks up at the heavens, what is he most enthralled by? Most enthralled by is the moon. Not the sun, but the moon. So he asked, David HaMelech, why are you skipping over the sun? The sun is like the big brother. Why are you going right to the moon? To build on that question, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the first mitzvah you give us is Kiddush HaChodesh. Why? Excuse me, it's not an exciting mitzvah, it's not a glamorous mitzvah. So why is Kiddush HaChodesh the first? Why is that number one? And now we understand really four distinct answers. Answer number one, and again, they're the same. It's the same. Two questions. It's the same question. Why is David HaMelech focusing on the moon, and why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu focusing on the moon as the first mitzvah? Answer number one, because remember again, giving us the calendar first. The moon represents control over time. You control your calendar. You control your schedule. And if there's not enough time for something, it just means that I'm using my time for something else. Maybe I have to reprioritize. Maybe I have to reallocate. But ultimately, again, slaves don't control time. Free people absolutely do. So lesson number one of the moon is I am in control of my time. Lesson number two of the moon is that the moon reminds us that both as a nation and as individuals, although there may be times when we are deficient and broken and compromised, we always have the ability to regenerate. We always have the ability to rebuild. We always have the ability to regroup. We always have the ability to remake something of ourselves. Lesson number three, we have to start out in life being a moon, reflecting the light of parents, reflecting the light of others. And the truth is, part of life is always taking in positive light from wherever it may come and then going and shining it forth. But you can't spend your life as a moon. You have to start as a moon, but you can't end as a moon. I start as a moon, and it's an incredibly important place to start, but I ultimately, again, have to graduate to being a sun. And lesson number four is that we start with the moon. David HaMelech is fixated on the moon. Why? Because the moon is the ultimate faithful servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. More than anything else, because the moon has to change, the moon has to adapt, the moon has to morph. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the moon, this is what I need of you. And the moon is a faithful servant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The moon never leaves its post. The moon always fulfills its shlichus and always does what the HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks of us. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu, David HaMelech, both of them saying, Klal Yisrael, look at the moon. Look at the moon. The moon leads a mission-driven existence. What's your shlichus? What's your mission? What's your agency? What is it that you're supposed to accomplish? And by the way, when you figure it out, don't get to, you know what happens so often in life? You ever have a moment where you finally figured out what your shlichus is, like what you're supposed to do. You have like that epiphanical moment. I know it's a made-up word, but I like it, right? You have like that epiphany moment. You have that where like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. And then what happens? Usually the phone rings, right? The phone rings, or you get a text message or an email, or like something happens, and like, oh, I got to deal with this now, and the whole thing is done. The whole thing is done, right? The moment just evaporates, and I'm right back dealing with whatever it was that I was dealing with beforehand. And ultimately, again, the moon teaches us, stay on track, stay on mission, stay on message. Shelo yishanu es tafkidam. The moon does what it's supposed to do, and it never deviates. It never departs from its sacred task. That is the message to us. So this was the message of David HaMelech. This was the message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling us, HaChodesh Hazeh. And again, we have Rosh Chodesh coming. So Meretz Hashem comes to the end of this week, going right Wednesday night, Thursday, going into Shabbos. We're going to look up, we're going to see no moon, and then a little moon. And again, to inculcate within ourselves these profound lessons. We control time. Yes, it's true that sometimes in life we mess up and we are diminished, but we have the ability to go ahead and regenerate. We have to take in the beautiful rays of Kedusha wherever they may be and reflect them, but we also have to work on creating our own light. And lastly, find your shlichus, find your mission. And when you do, don't get distracted. Live like the moon. Shelo yishanu es tafkidam. The moon has a tafkid, the moon has a mission, it never deviates. we need to find that same koach, that same resolve, and that same commitment as well. All right, we'll stop over here for tonight. We'll continue Rez Hashem next week. Same place. Hopefully the microphone will be working Rez Hashem by then. Have a good evening.